The Hummer slowed at the red light, its engine humming softly under the glow of city neon. Inside, Kwame Bafour sat relaxed, laughing beside his lover, the world bending easily to his wealth. Then he saw her. An old woman stood by the roadside, her body bent, her hands trembling as she stretched them toward passing cars. Her clothes were torn. Her feet were bare. And around her wrist was a faded bracelet Kwame had not seen in decades. His breath caught, his heart slammed. The woman lifted her head. For a split second, their eyes almost met. Kwame's smile vanished. The world went silent. Before the light turned green, before he could speak, fate had already stopped him. Before we begin this story, tell us in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is there. And if stories about life choices and karma move your heart, don't forget to subscribe. Kwame Bafour had mastered the art of appearing untouchable. From the outside, his life looked like a flawless portrait painted with money, power, and control. Every morning he woke up in a glass-walled penthouse overlooking the city's financial district, where the sun rose over steel towers and moving traffic like a promise that belonged only to him. His name alone could open doors, silence rooms, and change the direction of conversations. He was not just rich. He was influential. Kwame was the CEO of Bafour Group, a logistics and energy empire that stretched across multiple African countries. Oil terminals, shipping fleets, solar farms, his signature was everywhere. Politicians answered his calls. Banks bent their rules. Young entrepreneurs mentioned his name with reverence as if he were a living myth, and Kwame liked it that way. He wore tailored suits that fit him like armor. His watch cost more than most people's houses. His voice, calm and controlled, carried the authority of a man who had never been told no and forced to accept it. By his side almost always was Nadine Uwamwisa. Nadine was beautiful in a sharp modern way. Perfect skin, elegant posture, eyes that scanned rooms not for people but for status. She moved through luxury as if it were her natural habitat, laughing lightly, touching Kwame's arm possessively whenever another woman lingered too long nearby. To Nadine, Kwame was not just a man. He was a symbol of arrival, of escape from anything ordinary, of never having to look back. That afternoon, they were on their way to a private charity gala, one of the kind Kwame attended more for appearances than belief. The Hummer glided through traffic, escorted by respect-tinted windows shielding them from the city outside. Nadine adjusted her sunglasses and glanced out at the street with mild irritation. "Why does this part of the city always smell like dust and exhaust?" she muttered. "They should clean it up if they want investors." Kwame said nothing. He was scrolling through messages on his phone board members, international partners, numbers that ran into millions. His world was measured in profits and projections, not sidewalks and strangers. A man on the street knocked lightly on the car window, holding out a flyer. Nadine flinched. "Yaw," she snapped toward the driver. "Lock the doors." "Yaw." Mensima tightened his grip on the steering wheel but said nothing. The doors were already locked. Kwame barely noticed. At some point long ago he had trained himself not to see certain things. Beggars, street vendors, old faces lined with struggle. They existed, yes, but at a distance, like background noise. There had been a time when those faces had looked like his own reflection, but that time was buried. Kwame rarely spoke about his past. When journalists asked, he offered a neat version: humble beginnings, hard work, destiny fulfilled. He never mentioned hunger, or the nights his mother stayed awake counting coins with shaking hands, or the sound of her voice when she told him again and again, "One day, my son, you will not live like this." That woman belonged to another life, a life Kwame believed he had outgrown. Nadine leaned closer, resting her head briefly against his shoulder. "After the gala, we should talk about Monaco," she said casually. "I've been thinking, Africa is great, but I don't see why we should limit ourselves." Kwame smiled faintly. "We'll see." She smiled back, satisfied. Nadine always liked answers that sounded open but leaned toward agreement. The Hummer slowed as traffic thickened near an intersection. Red lights reflected off polished metal. Street noise crept in through the edges of the car's insulation, voices, horns, footsteps. Kwame looked up from his phone, his gaze drifting without purpose. That was when everything shifted. At first he noticed her the way one notices a shadow, without focus, without meaning. An old woman standing near the curb, slightly bent, her clothes hanging loosely from her frail body. Then something tugged at him, a strange tightening in his chest. He looked again. She was very old, Her hair was thin and gray, wrapped in a faded scarf. Her feet were bare against the hot pavement. One hand clutched a small plastic cup with a few coins at the bottom. The other stretched out weakly toward passing cars. Most drivers looked straight ahead. Some rolled up their windows. Kwame felt an unfamiliar discomfort rise in his throat. Nadine noticed his silence. "What are you staring at?" Kwame didn't answer immediately. His eyes were fixed on the woman's wrist. Around it was a bracelet. Old, faded, leather cracked with age, a small metal clasp dulled by time. Kwame's heart skipped. No, it couldn't be. That bracelet wasn't special to anyone else. It wasn't expensive. It wasn't fashionable. But Kwame knew it. He knew every scratch, every worn edge. His father's bracelet. Kojo before had worn it every day until the day he died. And after that, Kwame remembered his mother holding it like a lifeline, pressing it against her chest when she thought no one was watching. Kwame's fingers tightened around his phone. His breathing changed. The woman shifted, coughing weakly. Her arm lifted slightly higher, the bracelet catching the sunlight. Kwame felt dizzy. Nadine followed his gaze and frowned. "Don't tell me you're feeling sorry again," she said. "If you start giving to one, they'll swarm the car." Kwame didn't hear her. His mind was racing backward, tearing through years he had carefully sealed away. Memories surged without permission. Dusty streets, the smell of frying oil. His mother's voice calling his name at dusk. Imani. He hadn't said her name in years, not aloud, not even in his thoughts. The light remained red. Seconds stretched unnaturally long. The woman lifted her head slightly, her eyes clouded but searching, scanning the line of cars as if hoping for mercy. For a brief, terrifying moment, her gaze moved toward the Hummer. Kwame's heart slammed against his ribs. What if? The thought barely formed before fear crushed it. What if it was her? What if the past had found him not in his office, not in a controlled interview, but here on the street in full daylight? Nadine sighed impatiently. "Kwame, can we move? I don't like this area." The traffic light flickered. Yellow. Kwame swallowed hard. "Yaw," he said suddenly, his voice sharper than he intended. "Don't move." Yaw hesitated. "Sir, don't move the car." The light turned green. Horns blared behind them. The woman took a step closer to the road, her hand trembling. Kwame stared at her face now. Deep lines carved by time and suffering. A mouth that had once smiled at him. Eyes that had once watched him sleep. His chest burned. Before he could speak again, before he could make sense of the chaos in his mind, the car behind them honked loudly, breaking the moment. Kwame flinched. The world rushed back in, and in that instant he knew one thing with terrifying clarity. His past was no longer willing to stay buried. "Yaw, turn the car around." Kwame's voice came out low, almost hoarse, as if the words had scraped their way up from somewhere deep inside him. Yaw Mensima glanced at the rearview mirror. He had driven Kwame for nearly 10 years through boardroom wars and midnight emergencies, and he knew that tone. It was the sound of a command that was not open for discussion. But Nadine heard it too. "Turn around," she repeated sharply. "Kwame, are you serious?" The light just turned green. Everyone is watching. The horns behind them grew louder, impatient, angry. Traffic surged forward around the Hummer cars, swerving to get past. Kwame didn't look at Nadine. His eyes were still fixed on the sidewalk, on the old woman whose thin frame seemed to sway as she stepped back from the road. "Yaw," he said again more firmly. "Now." Yaw nodded and signaled carefully, maneuvering the Hummer toward a side street. The movement felt unreal to Kwame, like watching his own life shift direction without permission. Nadine straightened in her seat. "What is wrong with you?" she demanded. "We're late. The press will already be there." Kwame exhaled slowly. His heart was pounding so hard it hurt. "I need to check something," Nadine scoffed. "Check what, a beggar? Kwame, don't tell me you're doing this again." "Again?" The word stung. Yaw parked a short distance away where the Hummer's presence wouldn't draw immediate attention. The engine idled, vibrating faintly beneath them. Kwame's hand rested on the door handle. For a moment he didn't move. Fear wrapped itself tightly around his chest. What if I'm wrong? What if I walk up to her and she's just another stranger, and worse, what if he was right? Nadine leaned closer, lowering her voice. "Kwame, listen to me. You don't need this kind of embarrassment. People will take pictures. Someone will recognize you." Kwame finally turned to her. His eyes were darker now, unsettled. "I don't care," he said. That was when Nadine realized something had shifted. Not just the plan, not just the evening, something deeper. Kwame opened the door and stepped out. The heat hit him first, the raw, unfiltered heat of the street, nothing like the controlled climate of his car or offices. Sounds rushed in too, vendors calling out engines, rumbling distant music, coughing. He walked slowly, each step heavier than the last. The old woman was still there. Up close she looked even smaller, frailer. Her shoulders were hunched, her back curved as if carrying a weight far heavier than age alone. The plastic cup in her hand shook slightly. Kwame stopped a few feet away. For a moment he just stood there staring. She didn't look up at first. "Madam," his voice cracked unexpectedly. He cleared his throat. "Madam." She turned her head slowly. Her eyes were dull with exhaustion, but when they landed on him something flickered. Not recognition, at least not yet. Just the reflex of hope that lived in people who had nothing else left. She extended her cup a little further. "Please," she whispered. "Anything, my son, my son." The words struck him like a blow. Kwame felt his knees weaken. He forced himself to breathe, to stay upright. "Imani," he said quietly. The old woman froze. Her fingers tightened around the cup. Her gaze sharpened, searching his face with sudden urgency, as if pulling it apart layer by layer. Who are you?" she asked, her voice trembling. Kwame swallowed hard. "It's me." Her eyes widened slightly, then narrowed again. Confusion crossed her face, followed by disbelief. "No," she said, shaking her head. "No, my son is—" Her voice trailed off. "My son is far away." Kwame took a step closer. "It's me," he repeated, barely above a whisper. "Kwame." Her breath caught. The cup slipped from her hand, coins clattering onto the pavement. She didn't notice. Her hands rose slowly, hovering in the air between them, as if afraid to touch something that might disappear. "Kwame," she said, the name fragile on her tongue. Is that really you?" Tears burned behind Kwame's eyes. "Yes, Mama." The word broke something open inside him. Imani before let out a soft, broken sound, half sob, half gasp. Her knees buckled. Kwame lunged forward just in time, catching her as her body went limp. "Mama!" he shouted. People nearby turned. A woman selling fruit rushed over. A man called out for help. Kwame lowered Imani carefully to the ground, cradling her head in his hands. Her skin felt hot. Too hot. "Please," the fruit vendor said urgently. "She has been sick for days. She barely eats." Kwame looked at Imani's face. Her closed eyes, her shallow breathing, and a wave of guilt crashed over him so violently he almost couldn't breathe. How long had she been like this? How long had she been alone? Nadine appeared behind him, her heels clicking sharply against the pavement. She stopped short when she saw the scene. "Oh my God," she murmured, then covered her mouth. "Kwame!" Kwame looked up at her, his eyes blazing with emotion. "Call an ambulance," he said. "Now!" Nadine hesitated. "A public ambulance. Do you know how long that could take?" Kwame stood abruptly, lifting Imani into his arms with surprising strength. She was light, far too light. "I'm not waiting," he said. Ya had already opened the back door of the Hummer, his face tight with concern. Kwame laid his mother gently across the seat, cushioning her head with his jacket. As he climbed in beside her, his hand brushed against her wrist again. The bracelet, the same one. A memory surged unbidden, his father's laughter, his mother's tired smile, the way she used to touch that bracelet when she prayed. Nadine slid into the car, last silent now. Ya drove fast, weaving through traffic with purpose. Kwame held Imani's hand, afraid to let go, afraid she might slip away if he did. "Mama," he whispered, "I'm here. I won't leave you again." Her eyelids fluttered. Her lips moved, though no sound came out. Tears slid down Kwame's cheeks unchecked. For the first time in years, he wasn't thinking about markets or meetings or reputation. He was thinking about a little boy who once promised his mother he would take care of her, and a man who had failed to keep that promise. The city blurred past the windows as the Hummer sped toward the nearest hospital. Behind them, the intersection returned to its normal rhythm, cars moving, people walking, life continuing as if nothing extraordinary had happened. But for Kwame before, nothing would ever be the same again. The first hospital Kwame reached was not the kind his name usually entered. It was a public facility sitting just off a crowded market road, its walls stained by time and heat, its entrance overflowing with people who had been waiting so long they no longer looked surprised by suffering. A few nurses moved quickly between benches, but their speed couldn't keep up with the sheer number of bodies. The air smelled of antiseptic mixed with sweat and dust. Yaw pulled up near the emergency entrance, and before the Hummer had fully stopped, Kwame was out lifting Imani into his arms again. "Clear the way." He barked, his voice carrying a command that made heads turn instantly. Some people stepped aside, startled. Others froze, staring at the expensive suit, the luxury car, the woman limp in his arms. A mother holding a crying baby whispered, Is that him?" Nadine followed behind, her face tight, scanning the crowd like it was an enemy. "Kwame," she said, sharply, catching up to him, "this place is not safe. People will recognize you." Kwame didn't slow down. "Let them." A nurse in a faded uniform rushed toward them. "What happened?" She collapsed. Kwame said, breathless, "She's burning up. She's weak. Please help her." The nurse glanced at Imani's face and nodded, signaling to another staff member. "Put her on the stretcher." They transferred Imani with careful hands. Her body looked alarmingly small against the worn hospital sheets, like a candle that had been melted down to its last fragile inch. Kwame walked beside the stretcher, his eyes locked on her as if refusing to blink would keep her alive. Nadine grabbed his arm, pulling him back slightly. "Kwame, stop," she hissed. "Do you understand what you're doing? You're making a scene. If the press finds out you brought a beggar..." Kwame yanked his arm away. "That beggar is my mother." The words landed like a slap. Nadine's lips parted. Her eyes widened, not with sympathy, but with disbelief and panic, as if someone had just told her the sky had cracked open. "Your mother," she repeated, voice low. "No. Kwame, that's impossible. You told me your mother was dead, Kwame?" Cut in his voice, hard. "I told you what was convenient." A few people nearby heard, and their faces shifted shocked curiosity, something almost hungry. Nadine's cheeks flushed. "Kwame, this is not the place for this conversation." Kwame turned to her fully, now his gaze raw. Then, "Don't talk," he said. "Not now." The stretcher disappeared behind a set of swinging doors marked emergency. Kwame started after it, but a security guard stepped in front of him. "Only medical staff beyond this point," the guard said. "I'm her son," Kwame replied. The guard hesitated. He didn't look convinced, but he recognized money and power when they stood in front of him, even without a name. A doctor emerged moments later, a slim man with tired eyes and a stethoscope hanging loosely around his neck. He looked like someone who had seen too many tragedies and learned not to flinch. "I'm Dr. Kofi Agyeman," he said. "Who brought her, I did." Kwame answered immediately. "Kwame Bafur." The doctor's expression flickered. Recognition, a faint tightening at the corner of his mouth. "The Kwame Bafur?" he asked almost unwillingly. Kwame didn't care about that right now. "Please," he said, voice breaking slightly. "Just tell me what she needs." Dr. Kofi studied him for a second longer, then nodded toward a hallway. "Come, but understand this is a public hospital. We'll do what we can." Kwame followed Nadine, trailing behind like a shadow that refused to leave. Inside, Imani lay on a bed as nurses checked her vitals. Her breathing was shallow. Her skin looked dry, stretched thin over bone. When they lifted her sleeve to place an IV, the sight of her arms so thin, so bruised, made Kwame's stomach turn. A nurse whispered to another, "She hasn't eaten properly in weeks." Kwame's jaw clenched. He couldn't bear hearing it spoken out loud. It made it real in a way his mind wasn't ready to accept. Dr. Kofi motioned Kwame aside. "She's severely dehydrated, malnourished. Fever is high, likely infection, possibly pneumonia. We need blood tests, chest imaging fluids immediately." Kwame nodded quickly. "Do it. Whatever you need. I'll pay." Dr. Kofi gave him a look that carried both fatigue and honesty. "Money helps, yes, but time matters more. How long has she been like this?" Kwame's throat tightened. I don't know." The doctor's gaze softened just a fraction, but his voice stayed steady. "Then prepare yourself. At her age, the body doesn't bounce back easily." Kwame stared at Imani through the glass window in the door. Her eyes remained closed, her lips slightly parted. Nadine stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Kwame, listen. If she's your mother, why was she on the street?" Kwame didn't answer immediately, because admitting the truth out loud felt like driving a knife into his own chest. Nadine continued, quieter but sharper. "This is going to destroy your image. People will say you abandoned her." Kwame finally turned to her. "And what if they do?" Nadine blinked. "Kwame, what if they say the truth?" He pressed, voice rising. "Maybe I deserve it." Nadine's face hardened. "No, You don't understand. This isn't just about feelings. Your investors, the board, your enemies will use this. They'll call you heartless, weak, unstable. Kwame laughed once bitterly. Unstable. Nadine, my mother is lying in there barely breathing. If I worry about investors right now, then I'm worse than they could ever say. Nadine's eyes flashed with frustration. So what, you're going to bring her to your penthouse, put her next to the life we built? Do you realize what that looks like? Our life, Kwame repeated slowly as if tasting the words. You mean your lifestyle? Nadine stiffened. How dare you? Kwame took a step closer, his voice low but cutting. How dare I, Nadine? You're standing in a hospital complaining about how it looks while an 85-year-old woman fights for her life. For a moment, Nadine had no words. Her pride and fear wrestled openly on her face. Then she lifted her chin and spoke with controlled contempt. Fine, she said. Be the hero. Carry your mother into your story. But don't expect me to play along while you ruin everything. Kwame stared at her, and in that moment he saw Nadine clearly beautiful, polished and emotionally distant like a mirror that reflected only what benefited her. Yaw approached quietly from behind, voice respectful. Sir, people outside are starting to recognize the vehicle. Some are taking photos. Kwame's stomach tightened. It was happening. The very thing Nadine feared, eyes, cameras, whispers, was beginning to gather. Dr. Kofi returned holding a clipboard. We've started fluids. She's responding slightly, but her oxygen level is low. I want to admit her. ICU might be needed, but we're limited here. Move her, Kwame said instantly. Send her to a private hospital. The best. Dr. Kofi hesitated. A transfer can be risky. Kwame's voice softened, pleading now. Doctor, please, she deserves better than this. The doctor watched him for a moment, then nodded. All right. But we need stabilization first. And you need to understand, she may wake up confused, frightened. She's been surviving in the harshest conditions. Kwame swallowed. I'll be here. Across the room, Nadine's phone buzzed. She glanced down, then froze slightly. Kwame noticed. What is it? Nadine's eyes flicked up. It's from a blogger, she said. They've already posted the Hummer at the public hospital. They're asking why you're here. Kwame felt his blood run cold. Not because of the gossip, but because it meant the world was about to learn what he had tried to keep buried. And somewhere in that flood of attention, his mother, his fragile, starving, forgotten mother, was going to become a headline. Inside the room, Imani's fingers twitched faintly. Kwame rushed to her bedside, taking her hand gently. Mama, he whispered, please, open your eyes. Her eyelids fluttered, just once, and as if sensing the presence of the son who had disappeared from her life, her lips moved, barely forming words. Kwame leaned closer, desperate. Imani's voice came out like a breath of wind. Kwame, she whispered. Why did you leave me? Kwame's chest shattered. And before he could answer, before he could find a single word strong enough to hold the weight of her question, Imani's eyes rolled back and the monitor beside her began to beep faster. The beeping grew louder, faster, sharper. Kwame froze for half a second, his mind refusing to accept what his ears were hearing. The sound sliced through the room like an alarm inside his chest. Doctor, he shouted. Nurses rushed in instantly. Dr. Kofi Agaman pushed past Kwame, his expression snapping into urgent focus. Step back, he ordered. Now! Kwame released his mother's hand, reluctantly backing away as medical staff surrounded the bed. Tubes were adjusted. Oxygen was increased. A nurse called out numbers Kwame didn't understand but felt in his bones. Imani's chest rose and fell unevenly. Too shallow, too weak. Kwame stood there helplessly, his expensive suit suddenly meaningless in the face of something he couldn't buy control or negotiate with. Come on, Mama, he whispered under his breath. Please, don't do this. Dr. Kofi glanced at the monitor, then at Kwame. She's crashing, he said bluntly. Her body is exhausted. Years of deprivation don't disappear just because she's on a hospital bed. The words hit Kwame harder than any accusation ever had. Years, not days, not weeks, years. Kwame's vision blurred. He pressed his fist against his mouth, trying to steady his breathing. He could still hear her voice in his head, fragile and confused. Why did you leave me outside the room? Voices rose. Someone shouted Kwame's name. Camera flashes burst through the glass panels like sudden lightning. The media had arrived. Nadine stood near the door, phone in hand, her face pale but controlled. She glanced between Kwame and the growing chaos outside, her jaw tightening with every passing second. "This is getting out of hand," she muttered. "Security should have handled this." Kwame didn't look at her. His eyes never left his mother. A nurse approached him carefully. "Sir, we need to move her to ICU immediately." "Yes," Kwame said. "Do it, please." They wheeled the bed out and Kwame followed instinctively, his body moving before his mind could catch up. He barely noticed Nadine falling behind her heels, slowing her certainty, wavering. The ICU corridor was colder, quieter, more controlled, but the tension was heavier. The doors slid open, and Amani was transferred once again, machines surrounding her like a fragile barrier between life and silence. Kwame stood outside, hands shaking. Yaw appeared beside him, voice low. "Sir, the press is asking questions. They want a statement." Kwame closed his eyes. A statement, as if this were a business merger gone wrong, as if his mother's life were a headline to be managed. "No," he said. "Not now, but I said no." Yaw nodded and stepped back. Moments later, Dr. Kofi came out, removing his gloves slowly. His face carried the weight of a man who had delivered bad news too many times. "We've stabilized her for now," he said, "but she's extremely weak. Infection. Dehydration, severe malnutrition. Her organs have been under strain for a long time." Kwame swallowed hard. "Is she going to survive?" The doctor hesitated just long enough for fear to bloom fully. "She's fighting," Dr. Kofi said carefully. "But the next 24 hours are critical." Kwame nodded, though the words barely registered. 24 hours felt like an eternity and a heartbeat at the same time. As Dr. Kofi turned away, Nadine stepped forward. "So it happens now?" she asked, her tone sharp with impatience, disguised as concern. The doctor looked at her briefly, then back at Kwame. "She needs rest. Familiar voices help. Someone should stay." "I'll stay," Kwame said immediately. Nadine stiffened. "You'll stay here?" "Yes, in the ICU," she pressed. "Kwame, be realistic. You have meetings tomorrow, investors flying in, the board." Kwame turned to her slowly, his eyes tired but resolute. "Cancel them." Nadine stared at him as if he'd spoken another language. "You can't just cancel." "I can," he said quietly. "And I will." The silence between them thickened. "You're choosing her," Nadine said flatly. Kwame didn't flinch. "I already did." Nadine's lips trembled, then hardened. "Fine," she said. "Just don't expect me to stand here and watch you throw away everything you worked for." Kwame looked at her, then really looked at her, and felt something inside him detach cleanly, decisively. "Everything I worked for," he echoed. "Nadine. She's the reason I survived long enough to work for anything." Nadine said nothing. She turned and walked away, her heels echoing down the corridor, each step sounding more distant than the last. Kwame watched her go, but there was no regret in his chest, only a dull clarity. He turned back to the glass wall of the ICU, watching his mother lie motionless among machines. A memory surfaced uninvited. He was 7 years old, lying on a thin mattress in a one-room house. Rain leaked through the roof. He was sick, shivering. Amani sat beside him all night, fanning him with a piece of cardboard, whispering prayers under her breath. "I'm here," she had said then. "I will never leave you." Kwame slid down into a chair, covering his face with his hands. "I'm here now," he whispered. "I'm sorry it took me so long." Hours passed. The hospital shifted into its night rhythm. The crowd outside thinned, but the story spread faster than the city lights. Screens lit up with headlines and speculation. Billionaire abandons mother beggar revealed as tycoon's mother. Shocking street encounter. Stunned City Kwame ignored it all. He sat by the ICU door, unmoving, his suit wrinkled, his phone silent. Near dawn, a nurse approached quietly. "She's waking up," she said. Kwame stood so fast the chair scraped loudly across the floor. He stepped inside slowly, afraid to rush the moment. Amani's eyes were open. They were cloudy, tired, but alive. "Mama," Kwame said softly. Her gaze drifted toward him. Recognition flickered, this time clearer than before. "Kwame," she murmured. "You look so big now." A choked laugh escaped him. Tears streamed freely down his face. "I grew up," he said, "but I forgot the most important thing." She shifted weakly, wincing slightly. Kwame moved closer, careful not to disturb the tubes. "Did I do something wrong?" she asked quietly. "Was I too poor?" The question pierced him. "No," Kwame said immediately, his voice breaking. "No, Mama. You did everything right. I was the one who failed." Imani studied his face, her expression softening despite the pain. She reached for his hand. "Life is hard," she whispered. "I didn't blame you. I just missed you." Kwame squeezed her hand gently as if afraid she might shatter. "I'm here now, and I'm not leaving. Ever." She closed her eyes, a faint smile touching her lips. Outside the room, the city buzzed with judgment, gossip, and outrage. Inside, a mother and son sat quietly, bound together by regret, love, and the fragile hope of a second chance. But the storm waiting beyond those hospital walls was only beginning. Morning arrived quietly, as if the city itself was holding its breath. Soft gray light filtered through the narrow ICU windows, falling gently across Imani's face. The machines beside her hummed in steady rhythm, now no longer screaming urgency, but still demanding respect. Every beep reminded Kwame that her life was balanced on something delicate, something he could not afford to ignore again. Kwame had not slept. He sat in the same chair, his jacket draped over the back. His shirt wrinkled, his eyes red from hours of watching his mother breathe. Each rise and fall of her chest felt like a personal victory. Each pause, no matter how brief, tightened his chest with fear. A nurse entered quietly, checking the IV line and jotting notes on a clipboard. She glanced at Kwame with a look that mixed professionalism and curiosity. "You've been here all night," she said softly. Kwame nodded. "I'm not going anywhere." She hesitated, then allowed herself a small, sympathetic smile. "She's a strong woman," she said. "She's still fighting." Kwame swallowed. "She's always been strong." When the nurse left, silence returned, thick, reflective silence. It gave Kwame too much space to think. His phone buzzed, once, twice, then again. He ignored it. After the fifth vibration, he picked it up reluctantly. Missed calls, dozens of them, messages stacking on top of each other. The board, his assistant, a foreign investor, and Nadine. He opened the news instead. His face stared back at him from the screen. Billionaire Kwame Before spotted at public hospital with elderly beggar, sources claim. Woman is his estranged mother, questions raised over family abandonment. Kwame felt a slow burn in his chest. Not anger, not yet, but something heavier. Accountability. He had known this moment would come. He just hadn't expected it to arrive with his mother lying unconscious a few feet away. A gentle cough pulled him back. Imani's eyes were open again, blinking slowly. Mama Kwame leaned forward instantly. She turned her head slightly toward him, her gaze settling on his face with effort. "You didn't go?" she said faintly. Kwame shook his head. "I promised." Her lips curved into a tired smile. "You used to promise many things," she whispered. There was no accusation in her tone, just truth. Kwame felt the weight of that truth settle heavily in his chest. "I know," he said quietly, "and I broke them." Imani closed her eyes briefly, gathering strength. "Why?" she asked. "Why did you stop coming?" The question hung in the air, simple and devastating. Kwame stared at his hands. They were smooth now, well kept. Nothing like the rough, calloused hands of the boy who once carried water in crates to help his mother. "I was afraid," he admitted, "afraid of being pulled back into the life I escaped, afraid that people would see where I came from and decide I didn't belong where I was going." Imani's brows knit together weakly. "Did you belong?" Kwame looked up, startled. She was watching him closely now, as if the answer mattered more than any apology. "I don't know," he said honestly. "I thought money would make me untouchable. But all it did was make me lonely." Imani sighed softly. "Your father used to say, 'A tree that forgets its roots will fall in the first strong wind.'" Kwame's throat tightened. Papa was right. Imani shifted slightly, discomfort flashing across her face. Kwame immediately called for the nurse, who adjusted her position and checked her vitals. When they were alone again, Imani spoke more quietly. "I didn't want to beg," she said. "I tried everything first, selling food, washing clothes, sleeping in churches, but my body, it became slow." Kwame closed his eyes, pain cutting deep. "Why didn't you call me?" Imani let out a weak, almost sad laugh. "I did, many times. Your number stopped working." Kwame froze. He remembered changing his phone, changing assistants, changing addresses. He remembered telling himself it was necessary. Clean breaks, new beginnings. He had never considered what those necessary choices had cost someone else. Tears slipped down his face. "I'm so sorry," he whispered. "I didn't know." Amani reached for his hand again. Her grip was faint but firm enough to be felt. Knowing now is what matters, she said. What will you do with it? Before Kwame could answer, the door opened. Yaw stepped inside, his expression serious. Sir, the board is demanding an emergency meeting. They say the situation is affecting the company's stock. Kwame inhaled slowly, then nodded. Set it up. Virtual. I'll join from here. Yaw blinked. From the hospital, yes. Yaw hesitated, then nodded respectfully. Understood. An hour later, Kwame sat in a small consultation room, laptop open, his mother resting nearby under watchful care. The faces of board members filled the screen, men and women in polished offices, concern etched into expressions trained to hide vulnerability. Kwame, one of them, began, "We need clarity. The narrative out there is damaging." Kwame straightened in his chair. "Then let me be clear." The room fell silent. "That woman in the hospital is my mother," he said. "And yes, I failed her. I won't deny it." Murmurs erupted instantly. "This is highly unorthodox, our investors." "You're admitting negligence." Kwame raised his hand. "I'm admitting humanity." Silence followed. For years, he continued. "We've spoken about values, about legacy, about building something that lasts. If we can't stand by those values when they become uncomfortable, then they're meaningless." One board member leaned forward. "Are you suggesting we endorse this narrative?" "I'm suggesting we stop running from it," Kwame replied. "I will take responsibility publicly, and I will ensure my mother receives the care and dignity she deserves." And Nadine, another, asked carefully, "The public associates her closely with you." Kwame's jaw tightened. "Nadine no longer speaks for me." That answer landed heavily. The meeting ended without applause, without agreement, but with something new. Respect. Reluctant, cautious respect. Kwame closed the laptop and returned to Amani's bedside. She was sleeping again, her breathing steadier than before. Kwame watched her, a quiet determination forming in his chest. This was no longer about reputation, or money, or fear. It was about doing what he should have done long ago. And he knew deep down that this choice, this moment, would change everything that came after. That afternoon, as the sun climbed higher and the hospital corridors grew warmer, Kwame found himself drifting backward in time. It started with a smell. A nurse walked past carrying a tray of food, and the faint scent of boiled maize and stew reached him. The moment it did, something unlocked inside his mind. His chest tightened, and suddenly he was no longer sitting beside an ICU bed. He was 10 years old again. Back in the old neighborhood where the roads were uneven and the walls of the houses leaned slightly as if tired of standing. The sun had always felt harsher there, the air heavier. He remembered sitting on a wooden bench outside their small room, watching his mother Amani stir a pot over a charcoal stove. "Kwame," she had said then, not turning around, "go and wash your hands. Food is almost ready." There hadn't been much food. There never was. But she always said it the same way, as if abundance were just around the corner. His father, Kojo Bafur, had been alive then. A quiet man with strong hands and tired eyes. Kojo didn't talk much, but when he did, people listened. He fixed radios, carried loads at the market, did whatever work he could find. At night, when the power went out, as it often did, Kojo would sit beside Kwame and tell him stories by candlelight. One day he used to say, "You will build a house so strong that no rain will ever touch you." Kwame had believed him. Then Kojo fell sick. It happened slowly at first. A cough, fatigue, days when he didn't come home until very late, leaning heavily on a friend's shoulder. The hospital bills came one after another until Amani started selling her clothes to keep up. Kwame remembered the night Kojo died. The house was full of people, but Kwame had never felt so alone. He remembered clutching his mother's wrapper as she cried silently, her body shaking while she tried to stay strong for him. After that, everything changed. Amani became both mother and father. She woke before sunrise and returned long after dark. She sold roasted corn, fried dough, anything that could bring in a few coins. Some days she came home with nothing but dust on her feet and exhaustion in her eyes. Kwame watched her grow thinner, older. Still, she smiled at him. "You must go to school," she insisted, even when the fees were late. "Education is your road out." Kwame did well, too well. Teachers noticed. A local scholarship came, then another. Slowly, doors began to open. When Kwame was 18, he left for the city. Imani cried that day, not because she was sad, but because she was proud. "Don't forget who you are," she had told him, pressing Kojo's old bracelet into his hand. "And don't forget me." At first, Kwame didn't. He called often, sent money when he could, came home when work allowed, but the city was hungry. It demanded more of him every year, more time, more focus, more sacrifice. As his success grew, so did the distance. He started missing calls, then visits, then entire years. And somewhere along the way, Nadine Uwamwiza entered his life. Nadine had admired his ambition from the beginning. She liked the way people stepped aside when he walked into a room. She liked his suits, his cars, his future. But she did not like his past. The first time Kwame mentioned his mother, Nadine had frowned slightly. "She still lives?" "There?" she asked, choosing her words carefully. "Yes," Kwame said, "for now." Nadine smiled thinly. "You can't drag old stories into a new life, Kwame. People judge. You know that." At first he argued. Later he stopped. He told himself he was protecting his mother from scrutiny, from gossip, from humiliation. But deep down, he knew the truth. He was protecting himself. The memory shifted again, snapping back to the present with a sharp clarity that made Kwame inhale deeply. He was sitting beside Imani's hospital bed now. Her face looked softer in sleep, almost peaceful, as if the years of hardship had loosened their grip for a moment. Kwame reached out and brushed his thumb gently over the back of her hand. "I was ashamed," he whispered, even though she couldn't hear him. "And that shame almost killed you." A quiet knock came at the door. Abena Nkrumah stepped in, the woman from the market who had helped Imani before she collapsed. She held a small bag of fruit in her hands, her eyes cautious but kind. "I heard she is here," Abena said softly. "I wanted to see her." Kwame stood immediately. "Thank you," he said, his voice sincere, "for everything you did." Abena shook her head. "Any mother deserves help," she replied. Then she hesitated. "She used to talk about you, you know." Kwame felt his chest tighten. "She did, yes." Abena nodded. "She said her son was important, powerful. She said one day you would come back." Kwame closed his eyes briefly. "Did she ever complain?" Abena smiled sadly. "Never. She said a mother's love does not come with conditions." The words struck him harder than any public criticism. Abena placed the fruit on the table and turned to leave. At the door, she paused. "You came back," she said simply. "That matters." When she left, Kwame sat back down, his mind heavy with everything he had been and everything he still needed to become. That evening, Nadine called. Kwame watched the phone ring for a long moment before answering. "What do you want?" he asked calmly. There was a pause on the other end. "You embarrassed me," Nadine said. "People are asking questions. My mother almost died," Kwame replied. "That's what matters. You chose her over us." Nadine said bitterly. "No," Kwame corrected. "I chose what was right." Silence followed. Then Nadine spoke again, colder now. "If you continue this path, don't expect me to stay." Kwame looked through the glass at Imani, her chest rising steadily, her life still fragile but present. "I understand," he said. And for the first time, he truly did. When the call ended, Kwame felt something lift from his chest. Not relief exactly, but certainty. The boy who had once promised his mother the world had lost his way. The man he was becoming now would not again. Imani woke slowly, as if climbing up from a deep, heavy place where time moved differently. At first, she thought she was dreaming. The ceiling above her was too white, too clean. The air smelled sharp and unfamiliar. Nothing like the dust and smoke she had grown used to. She blinked once, then again, her eyes adjusting to the light. Pain greeted her gently but firmly, an ache in her chest, a weakness in her limbs, a dryness in her throat that made swallowing difficult. She turned her head slightly, and there he was. Kwame sat beside her bed, leaning forward, his elbows on his knees, his hands clasped tightly together. His expensive suit looked out of place here, wrinkled and dull under the hospital lights. His face, however, was unmistakable, older, broader, harder around the edges. But it was him. "Kwame," she whispered. He jerked upright instantly, as if her voice had pulled him back from somewhere far away. "Mama," he said softly, standing up. "You're awake." Her eyes searched his face slowly, carefully, as though she were afraid he might vanish if she looked too quickly. "You stayed?" she said again, more to herself than to him. Kwame nodded. "I told you I would." She studied him for a long moment, then a faint, fragile smile appeared on her lips. "You used to say that when you were small," she murmured, "when you were afraid of the dark." Kwame's throat tightened. He pulled the chair closer and sat down, careful not to disturb the tubes and wires around her. "I'm not afraid anymore," he said. "And I'm not going anywhere." Imani closed her eyes briefly, as if savoring the words. When she opened them again, they were moist. "I thought I would die on that street," she said quietly. I didn't think I would see you again." Kwame reached for her hand, holding it gently. "I almost lost you," he admitted, "and I will never forgive myself for that." She squeezed his fingers weakly. "Life does not always give us the chance to fix things," she said, "but sometimes it is kind." A nurse entered softly, checking Imani's vitals and adjusting her drip. She smiled politely at Kwame. "Her condition is improving," she said, slowly but steadily. Kwame nodded, gratitude flooding his chest. After the nurse left, Imani spoke again, her voice steadier now. "Tell me about your life," she said, "the real one." Kwame hesitated. He had spoken about his success countless times to reporters, to investors, to strangers who admired him, but never like this, never to the one person whose opinion mattered most. "I built a company," he began carefully. "It grew faster than I expected. Money came, power came, and with it, fear." "Fear," Imani echoed. "Yes," Kwame said. "Fear of losing everything, fear of being looked down on, fear of being reminded of where I started." Imani listened quietly, her eyes never leaving his face. "I thought I had to become someone else to survive," he continued, "someone untouchable. So I pushed away anything that made me feel small." Imani's brow furrowed slightly. "And I made you feel small?" "No," Kwame said, quickly shaking his head. "You made me feel human, and I was running from that." Silence filled the room, heavy but not hostile. After a while, Imani sighed. "I never wanted you to feel ashamed of me," she said. "I wanted you to fly." Kwame's eyes filled with tears. "You taught me how," he whispered. "And then I forgot who gave me wings." Imani's breathing deepened, exhaustion returning slowly. She closed her eyes, but her hand remained wrapped around his. Outside the room, the hospital buzzed with quiet activity. Nurses moved in and out. Doctors spoke in low tones. Somewhere down the corridor, a television played softly. Kwame's phone vibrated again. He ignored it. Moments later, Yaw appeared at the door, his expression serious. "Sir," he said quietly, "the press is requesting an official interview. They're waiting downstairs." Kwame stood up slowly, careful not to wake Imani. He stepped outside into the hallway. "What are they saying?" Kwame asked. Yaw hesitated. "Some are sympathetic, others are harsh. They're questioning your character, your past decisions." Kwame nodded. "They should." Yaw looked surprised. Sir Kwame leaned against the wall, exhaling slowly. "For too long I've controlled every story about my life. Maybe it's time I stop hiding from this one." Yaw studied him for a moment, then nodded. "What would you like me to tell them?" Kwame glanced back through the glass at his mother. "Tell them the truth," he said. "But not today. Today belongs to her." Yaw bowed his head slightly. "Understood." As evening approached, the sky outside the hospital shifted to deep orange, then purple. The day felt longer than most, stretched thin by emotion and consequence. Imani woke again just before sunset. "Kwame," she said softly. "Yes, Mama." "You look tired," she observed. He smiled faintly. "I've been worse." She paused, then asked carefully, "That woman, the one from the car, is she your wife?" Kwame stiffened slightly, then shook his head. "No." Imani nodded. "Good." Kwame blinked. "Good." Imani turned her head to look at him, her gaze gentle but knowing. "A woman who truly loves you would not be ashamed of where you came from." Kwame felt the truth of her words settle deep inside him. Later that night, Nadine arrived at the hospital. She looked composed, elegant as always, but there was tension in her posture, a tightness in her jaw. "I need to see you," she said to Kwame quietly. He stepped into the hallway with her. "This is becoming a spectacle," Nadine said immediately. "People are linking me to this story. I didn't sign up for this." Kwame met her gaze calmly. "I didn't sign up to abandon my mother." Nadine's eyes flashed. "So that's it. You're choosing guilt over your future," No, Kwame replied. "I'm choosing responsibility over fear," she scoffed. "And where does that leave me?" Kwame was silent for a moment. Then he spoke slowly, clearly. It leaves you free to walk away. Nadine stared at him, stunned. You don't mean that. I do, he said. I can't build a life with someone who sees my mother as a problem. Nadine's face hardened. You'll regret this. Kwame shook his head. I already regret what truly mattered. Nadine turned and walked away without another word. Kwame returned to Amani's room. She was sleeping again, peaceful, unaware of the confrontation that had just reshaped his life. He sat beside her and whispered softly, I choose you. And for the first time in many years, that choice felt like freedom. By the next morning, the story had grown teeth. It was no longer just whispers in hospital corridors or blurry photos on gossip blogs. It was everywhere. Radio shows, morning television trending headlines, scrolling endlessly across glowing screens. Billionaire's mother found begging. Public outrage. As Kwame Bafour's past resurfaces, where was he all these years? Kwame heard the echoes of it even when the room was quiet. A small television mounted on the wall across the ICU corridor played a morning news program. The volume was low, but the anchor's tone was sharp, hungry. Sources confirm the elderly woman is indeed Amani Bafour, mother of the billionaire CEO. Questions remain about how she ended up homeless while her son built an empire. Kwame reached over and turned the television off. He stood there for a moment, hands resting on the cold metal edge of the bed, breathing slowly. Amani was asleep again. Her face relaxed, her breathing steady. That mattered more than any headline. Still, he knew he couldn't hide forever. Yaw arrived shortly after, holding a tablet. Sir, he said carefully, there are calls from every direction. Government officials, sponsors, even charities asking for statements. Kwame nodded. And the board? They're nervous, Yaw admitted. Some want you to issue an apology immediately. Others think silence will make it worse. Kwame looked at his mother. Silence already made it worse, he said quietly. As if summoned by the weight of the moment, Dr. Kofi entered the room. She's stable, the doctor said. Still weak, but improving. We'll move her out of ICU later today if all goes well. Kwame exhaled in relief. Thank you. Dr. Kofi hesitated, then spoke again. I've been getting calls, too. Journalists. They want access. I've refused, of course. Kwame nodded. I appreciate that. The doctor studied him for a moment. You know, he said slowly, people will judge you no matter what you do next. The question is, what kind of judgment can you live with? Kwame met his gaze. The honest one. Later that afternoon, Kwame stepped outside the hospital for the first time in days. The air felt different, thicker, heavier, charged with expectation. A small crowd had gathered near the entrance, cameras, raised microphones poised like weapons. Security kept them at a distance, but their eyes locked onto Kwame the moment he appeared. Questions exploded instantly. Mr. Bafour, is it true you abandoned your mother? How long has she been homeless? Did your partner force you to cut ties? Do you regret your choices? Kwame raised a hand slowly. The noise didn't stop immediately, but it softened enough for him to speak. My mother is inside this hospital, he said calmly. She is recovering. That is my priority. Is she your responsibility now? Someone shouted. Kwame nodded once. She always was. The crowd murmured, surprised by the simplicity of his answer. I won't deny my mistakes, he continued. I won't hide from them either, but I ask you respect her privacy. She did not choose this attention. For a brief moment, something shifted. Not everyone lowered their cameras, but the tone changed. The hunger dulled, replaced by curiosity and for some sympathy. Kwame turned and went back inside. Upstairs in a quiet waiting room, Nadine was waiting. She stood as soon as she saw him, her posture rigid, her expression carefully controlled. You went outside, she said, without me. Kwame looked at her, surprised. I didn't know you were here, she folded her arms. Of course you didn't. There was a long silence between them, heavy with things already said and things that could never be taken back. I didn't come to fight, Nadine said finally. I came because this situation is getting out of control. Kwame remained standing. I agree. Nadine stepped closer. Then listen to me. You need damage control, a joint appearance, a statement about reconciliation, something that reassures people you're still you. Kwame tilted his head slightly. And who is that? Nadine hesitated. The man they admire, the success story. Kwame's voice stayed calm. Not the man who abandoned his mother. Nadine's jaw tightened. You're letting guilt destroy everything. No, Kwame replied. I'm letting truth rebuild something. she scoffed softly. Truth doesn't pay the price when stocks fall. Kwame looked at her steadily. Then maybe the price was overdue. Nadine's eyes flashed with anger and fear. You think people will respect this? You think vulnerability makes you strong? Kwame answered without hesitation. It makes me real. She laughed bitterly. Real doesn't survive in our world. Kwame thought of his mother's frail hand gripping his, of her quiet smile, of the nights she had gone hungry so he could eat. Then maybe our world is broken, he said. Nadine stared at him, truly seeing him for the first time since this all began. The man in front of her was not the polished symbol she had fallen for. He was heavier now, slower, but grounded. You're serious, she said softly. Yes, she exhaled sharply. If you do this, if you keep her in your life publicly, there's no going back. Kwame nodded. I know. Nadine looked away, her reflection catching in the glass window. Then I can't stay. Kwame didn't stop her. When she walked out, the sound of her heels echoed briefly, then disappeared. That evening, Kwame sat beside Amani as she was moved to a regular room. She was awake, alert, sipping water carefully. You look troubled, she said, watching his face. The world is loud, Kwame replied. And it's angry. Amani smiled faintly. It always is. He hesitated, then asked, Does it bother you that people know that they're talking? Amani thought for a moment. If my story helps another mother feel seen, then let them talk. Kwame felt something ease in his chest. As night fell, messages poured in, not just criticism, but support. Stories from people who had lost parents, from children who had walked away and regretted it, from strangers who saw themselves reflected in his failure. For the first time, the noise didn't feel like an attack. It felt like a reckoning. Kwame sat back, holding his mother's hand, and understood something with sudden clarity. This was the true test of his power. Not whether he could silence the world, but whether he could face it and remain human. The tension reached its breaking point the following morning. Kwame was reviewing medical notes with Dr. Kofi when his phone rang again. This time it wasn't a journalist or a board member. It was a number he recognized instantly. Nadine. He stared at the screen for a long moment before answering. Yes, he said. We need to talk. Nadine replied, her voice unusually calm. In person. Kwame closed his eyes briefly. I'm at the hospital. I know, she said. I'm downstairs. He hesitated. Every instinct told him this conversation would change everything, but perhaps that was unavoidable now. I'll come down, he said. They met in a quiet corner of the hospital garden, a small space with 2 benches and a struggling patch of green that looked like it was fighting to survive between concrete walls. The irony wasn't lost on him. Nadine stood with her arms crossed, sunglasses hiding her eyes. You look tired, she said. I am, Kwame replied simply. She removed her sunglasses slowly. Her eyes were sharp, calculating, but beneath that, something raw flickered fear. I've been thinking, Nadine said, about us, about what people are saying, about what this could do to your company. Kwame waited. I can help? She continued. We can manage this. Frame it as a misunderstanding. Say your mother refused help. Say you searched for her but couldn't find her. People will believe it if we say it together. Kwame's jaw tightened. That would be a lie. Nadine sighed. It would be a version. No, Kwame said. It would be cowardice. Her lips pressed into a thin line. You're being emotional. Yes, Kwame replied. Because this is personal. Nadine took a step closer. Kwame, I stood by you when no one else mattered. I helped shape the man people admire. Kwame met her gaze steadily. You helped shape the image, not the man. That landed harder than he intended. Nadine's composure cracked slightly. So what now, she demanded. You throw everything away for sentiment. Kwame shook his head. I'm choosing truth over comfort, and where does that leave me? She asked again, her voice rising. Kwame answered quietly. It leaves you facing a choice you've avoided, whether you can stand beside me as I am, not as the version that makes you feel secure. Nadine stared at him, stunned. You expect me to share my life with this? She gestured vaguely toward the hospital building. With my mother, Kwame asked calmly. Yes. Nadine laughed, sharp and bitter. You're insane. Kwame felt an unexpected calm settle over him. Then, this is where we part. The words hung in the air between them. You don't mean that, Nadine said, though her voice lacked conviction. I do. Kwame replied. I won't build a future that requires me to deny my past. Silence stretched. The distant sound of traffic filled the space between them. Finally, Nadine straightened. "You'll regret this," she said coldly. "People like you don't survive on morality alone." Kwame nodded. "Maybe not, but I can't survive without it." She turned and walked away, heels clicking sharply against the pavement, each step final. Kwame watched her go. Not with anger, not with relief, but with acceptance. When he returned upstairs, Imani was awake, sitting up slightly with the help of pillows. She smiled when she saw him. "You look lighter," she observed. Kwame pulled a chair close. "I made a decision." Imani studied his face. "About the woman? Yes." Imani nodded slowly. "Love that demands you erase yourself is not love," she said gently. Kwame swallowed. "You knew," she smiled. "Mothers often do." Later that day, Kwame called for a press conference. Yaw stared at him in disbelief. "Sir, are you sure, the board?" "I'm sure," Kwame said. "It's time." They set it up in the hospital's conference room. Cameras filled the space within minutes. Journalists leaned forward, hungry for sound bites, scandal blood. Kwame stepped to the podium alone. No Nadine, no carefully scripted defense, just him. "I won't insult your intelligence," he began. "You've seen the images. You know the story." The room quieted. "Yes," he continued. "The woman you saw begging on the street is my mother, Imani Bafour, and yes, I failed her." Gasps rippled through the crowd. "For years I chose comfort over responsibility, image over truth. I told myself I was protecting my future when in reality I was running from my past." A reporter shouted, "Why should the public forgive you?" Kwame didn't flinch. "You don't have to. This isn't about forgiveness, it's about accountability." Another voice called out, "What about your relationship with Nadine Uwamwiza?" Kwame answered without hesitation. "That relationship has ended." The room buzzed. "I am not asking for sympathy," Kwame continued. "I'm committing to change. My mother will never be abandoned again, and neither will the values she taught me." When the conference ended, reactions exploded instantly. Shock praise, condemnation, admiration. Kwame stepped away from the noise and returned to his mother's side. That night, as the city glowed beyond the hospital windows, Imani rested peacefully. Kwame sat beside her, holding her hand, feeling something unfamiliar but steady in his chest. Integrity. The storm was far from over. He knew that. Consequences were coming, financial, social, personal, but for the first time in his life, Kwame felt aligned. No more running, no more hiding. Whatever came next, he would face it as the man his mother had raised him to be. The consequences arrived faster than Kwame expected. By the next trading day, the markets reacted with brutal honesty. Before Group's stock dipped sharply in early hours, not enough to cripple the company, but enough to send a clear message. Uncertainty was expensive. Kwame stood in a quiet office borrowed from the hospital administration laptop, open numbers flickering across the screen. Red arrows, panic-driven sell-offs, analysts arguing on television about reputation risk and leadership instability. Yaw stood behind him, hands clasped. "The board wants another meeting," he said carefully. "Immediately." Kwame nodded. "Set it up." The video call opened with familiar faces, some stern, some guarded, some openly frustrated. "This is spiraling." One director began. "Investors are nervous. Sponsors are calling." Kwame leaned forward. "So am I." A murmur of surprise rippled through the virtual room. "I won't pretend this is easy," Kwame continued. "But I won't lie to save face either. If our company's value depends on my ability to abandon my mother, then we need to rethink what we're building." Another director sighed. "Kwame, this isn't about morality. It's about stability." Kwame's eyes hardened. Morality is stability. Without it, everything else is temporary. Silence followed, thick, uncomfortable. A senior board member spoke next, his tone measured. "You've taken responsibility publicly. That matters. But perception is reality. How do you plan to move forward?" Kwame exhaled slowly. "By aligning our actions with our words, full transparency, strong governance, and social responsibility that isn't performative." "You're proposing reforms," the member said. "I'm proposing accountability," Kwame replied. "Mine included." The meeting ended without a vote, without applause, but something had shifted. They hadn't removed him. They hadn't forced him to step aside. The door remained open. Kwame closed the laptop and leaned back exhausted. Outside the hospital room, a woman waited. She wore simple clothes, her posture cautious but determined. "I'm looking for Mr. Before," she said softly to the nurse. Kwame heard his name and stepped out. "I'm here." She introduced herself as Grace Nwoye, a community organizer who ran a small shelter for elderly women. "I knew your mother," Grace said gently. "She stayed with us a few nights when the weather was bad. She never complained. She only worried about being a burden." Kwame's chest tightened. "Thank you for helping her." Grace nodded. "We do what we can, but resources are thin. The elderly are invisible until something tragic happens." Kwame listened closely. "I didn't come to ask for money." Grace continued. "I came to ask if you'd listen." Kwame met her eyes. "I am." They spoke for nearly an hour about neglected elders, about broken family ties, about pride that kept people silent until it was too late. Grace spoke plainly without accusation. When she finished, Kwame felt the weight of a truth he could no longer ignore. Later that afternoon, he sat beside Imani, who was awake and alert, sipping warm soup. "Someone came to see me," he said. "She helps women like you." Imani nodded slowly. "There are many like me," she said. "They just don't get noticed." Kwame took a breath. "I want to change that." Imani studied him. "Not out of guilt," she said softly. "Out of understanding." "Yes," Kwame replied. "Out of responsibility." The phone buzzed again. This time it was an unknown number. Kwame answered. "Hello?" A familiar voice responded, cool, controlled. "Kwame, it's Nadine." He closed his eyes briefly. "What do you want?" "I saw your press conference," she said. "You're enjoying the attention." "I'm enduring it," Kwame corrected. Nadine paused. "I've been offered interviews," she said. "They want my side." Kwame's jaw tightened. And I want to know how far you plan to take this," she continued. "Because if you drag my name through your redemption story, I won't stay silent." Kwame's voice remained calm. "I haven't mentioned you." "I don't intend to," good Nadine said, "because I won't be the villain in your morality play." Kwame sighed. "Nadine, this isn't about you. It always is." She replied coldly and hung up. Kwame stared at the phone for a moment, then set it aside. That evening, as dusk settled over the city, he walked the hospital corridors alone. He passed patients lying two to a bed, families sleeping on chairs, nurses moving with quiet endurance. He stopped at a window overlooking the street where he had first seen his mother. Traffic flowed, people hurried, life went on. Kwame realized something then: his story had become public, but it was no longer just his. It had touched a nerve. People were watching not for spectacle now, but for direction. Back in Imani's room, she watched him approach. "You're thinking too hard," she said with a faint smile. "I'm thinking about what comes next," Kwame replied. Imani nodded. "Whatever you do, do it with humility." Kwame smiled softly. "I learned that from you." As night deepened, messages arrived, not demands this time, but stories. People sharing regrets, reunions, apologies delayed too long. Kwame read them slowly, feeling the weight of a collective ache. He wasn't cured of his past, but he was no longer hiding from it. And for the first time since the red light had stopped his car, Kwame understood the true cost of power and the rare chance he'd been given to use it well. The public apology did not end the storm. If anything, it changed its shape. Kwame learned that accountability invited two kinds of reactions: those who respected it and those who tried to exploit it. Within days, talk shows debated whether his remorse was genuine or strategic. Some praised his honesty, others called it a calculated performance designed to protect his empire. Kwame listened to none of it. His focus stayed on the small hospital room where his mother was slowly reclaiming strength, sip by sip, step by step. On the fourth morning after the press conference, Imani insisted on sitting up without help. "I'm not a child," she said firmly when the nurse protested. Kwame hovered nearby, torn between pride and fear. "Mama let them assist you." She smiled at him. "You worry too much." That's new. It was true. The old Kwame would have delegated concern to assistants. Now he watched every movement, every breath, as if presence itself were a form of protection. Later that day, Yaw arrived with a folder. "Sir," he said carefully, "the board has scheduled a full in-person session. They want you there." Kwame nodded. "When tomorrow morning?" Yaw hesitated. "There's more. Some members are proposing a temporary step back, not removal, but a symbolic gesture. They think it might calm investors." Kwame closed his eyes briefly. He had anticipated this. "Do they want me to disappear?" he asked quietly. "They want stability," Yaw replied. "At any cost." Kwame looked at his mother, who was watching him with quiet curiosity. "What are you thinking?" Amani asked. Kwame sat beside her. "They want me to step aside, just for a while." Amani considered this. "Is that what you want?" "No," Kwame said without hesitation. "But I'm not afraid of it anymore." Amani reached for his hand. "Power that cannot withstand truth is not power," she said. Kwame smiled faintly. "You always know what to say." The next morning, Kwame walked into the boardroom of Bafour Group for the first time since the scandal broke. The room was large, polished, intimidating glass walls, long table city skyline, stretching behind it like a reminder of everything at stake. Faces turned toward him, some familiar, some guarded. Kwame didn't wait to be invited to speak. "I know why we're here," he began calmly, "and I won't pretend this situation hasn't shaken confidence." A few heads nodded. "But I want to be clear," he continued. "If leadership means hiding when the truth is inconvenient, then I'm not interested in protecting that kind of leadership." A board member leaned forward. "Kwame, no one is questioning your competence. We're questioning the timing." Kwame met his gaze. "My mother almost died. That was the timing." Silence filled the room. "I'm willing to make sacrifices," Kwame said, "but I won't step away to preserve an illusion. I will step forward to repair what's broken." Another member spoke carefully. "Are you saying you refuse to step back?" Kwame paused. Then he shook his head. "I'm saying I refuse to hide. If you decide to remove me, that's your right, but I won't pretend this never happened." The discussion dragged on for hours. Numbers, risks, reputations. But beneath it all was something unspoken. Kwame had changed, and the board could feel it. When the meeting ended, no decision was announced. The uncertainty lingered. Kwame left the building without waiting for press. That afternoon, he went somewhere unexpected. He returned to the street where he had first seen his mother begging. The red light was still there. Traffic still slowed. People still passed by without looking. Kwame stood on the sidewalk quietly, unnoticed at first. Then someone recognized him. "Is that him?" a man whispered. Phones came out. Murmurs spread. Kwame raised his hands gently. "I didn't come to speak," he said. "I came to listen." A woman approached cautiously. "My mother sleeps 2 blocks from here," she said. "No one helps her." An elderly man spoke next. "I worked all my life. When my children moved away, I became invisible." Story after story poured out, raw, unfiltered, painful. Kwame listened, not as a billionaire, not as a symbol, as a son who had almost lost his chance to listen at all. That evening, he returned to the hospital with a quiet resolve. Amani looked up when he entered. "You smell like the street," she teased gently. Kwame smiled. "I needed to remember." He sat down and told her everything: the board, the uncertainty, the people he'd met. "I want to build something," he said slowly, "not to fix my image, to fix a gap I helped create." Amani nodded. "Then do it quietly," she said. "Let the work speak." 2 days later, Kwame made another announcement, not at a press conference, not with cameras flashing, through a simple statement. He announced the creation of a long-term elder care initiative, funded independently of Bafour Group, managed by an independent board with no branding bearing his face. The focus was clear: shelter, healthcare access, family reconciliation programs. No speeches, no applause. The reaction surprised everyone. Critics softened, support grew, even skeptics paused. The board reconvened soon after. This time the decision was unanimous. Kwame remained CEO, not because the storm had passed, but because he had walked straight through it. That night, Kwame sat beside his mother as rain tapped gently against the window. "You didn't lose everything," Amani said softly. Kwame shook his head. "I gained something I didn't know I was missing." She smiled. "Yourself." Kwame looked at her, really looked at her, stronger now, steadier, alive. For the first time since that red light stopped his car, Kwame felt something close to peace, not because he had been forgiven, but because he had chosen to become worthy of it. Nadine did not disappear quietly. 3 days after Kwame's elder care initiative was announced, her face appeared on a late-night talk show, perfectly styled, composed, and visibly wounded. The host leaned in with practiced sympathy. "You were very close to Kwame Bafour," he said. "How did this situation affect you?" Nadine sighed, eyes glistening just enough to sell sincerity. "I loved him," she said, "but I was blindsided. I never knew his mother was suffering like that, and suddenly I was painted as the villain." The clip spread quickly. By morning, social media was divided again, some defending her, others accusing her of opportunism. Headlines shifted tone. Former partner speaks out. Was Nadine treated unfairly? Kwame watched none of it. He was in the hospital courtyard with Amani, helping her take careful steps with a walker. Each movement was slow, deliberate, a reminder that healing was not dramatic. It was patient. "Careful," he said softly. She laughed under her breath. "I walked barefoot for years. This walker won't defeat me." He smiled, relieved to hear humor in her voice again. That afternoon, Yaw approached with a concerned look. "Sir, Nadine is requesting a meeting, privately." Kwame's shoulders tensed. "What does she want?" "She says it's about clearing the air," Yaw replied. "And image," Kwame exhaled. "All right, but not here." They met in a small cafe across the street from the hospital. Neutral ground, public enough to keep things contained. Nadine arrived 10 minutes late, sunglasses on, confidence carefully reconstructed. She sat down without greeting him. "You're avoiding me," she said. "I'm prioritizing my mother." Kwame replied calmly. Nadine scoffed. "You've made me look heartless." Kwame leaned back. "I didn't say your name. You didn't have to," she snapped. "People connect dots." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the clink of cups and low chatter around them. "What do you want?" Nadine, Kwame asked. She removed her sunglasses, revealing eyes sharper than before. "I want you to acknowledge that I wasn't the reason you walked away from your mother." Kwame considered this. "You weren't the reason," he said honestly. "But you made it easier." Her jaw tightened. "That's not fair." "It's truthful," Kwame replied. "And truth is what I'm choosing now." Nadine folded her arms. "You're rewriting the story," she said, "and I won't be erased." Kwame met her gaze. "No one is erasing you, but I won't lie to protect you either." She leaned forward. "Then let me meet her." Kwame froze. "Meet who? Your mother," Nadine said. "If I speak to her, if she says she doesn't blame me, people will stop attacking." Kwame's voice stayed even. "My mother is not a prop." Nadine laughed bitterly. "You think she wouldn't want peace?" Kwame stood. "This conversation is over." As he turned to leave, Nadine spoke again, quieter this time. "You're choosing her over everything. Over me. Over the life we planned." Kwame paused, then answered without turning around. "I'm choosing integrity over convenience. There's a difference." He walked away. That evening, Amani sat propped up on pillows, knitting slowly with donated yarn. She looked up when Kwame entered. "You look troubled again," she said gently. Kwame sat beside her and told her about Nadine's request. Amani listened without interruption. When he finished, she was quiet for a long moment. "She wants to see me," Amani said finally. Kwame stiffened. "Mama, you don't have to." "I know," she said, "but I want to." Kwame searched her face. "Are you sure?" Amani nodded. "Holding bitterness is also a burden. I've carried enough." The meeting happened the next day in a small hospital lounge. Nadine entered first, composed, cautious. Amani followed slowly, supported by Kwame. For a moment, no one spoke. Then Nadine stood and bowed her head slightly. "Mrs. Before," she said. "I'm sorry for what you've been through." Amani studied her calmly. "Are you sorry for me?" she asked, "or for yourself?" Nadine blinked. "Both," she admitted. Amani nodded. "Honesty is a beginning." They sat. "I never wished you harm," Nadine said. "I didn't know." Amani tilted her head. "Not knowing is easy when we choose not to look." The words landed softly but firmly. "I don't hate you," Amani continued, "but I won't pretend you helped." Nadine's eyes filled with tears. "I didn't know how to share him with a past that scared me." Amani smiled faintly. "Love that fears roots cannot grow deep." Silence followed, uncomfortable, clarifying. When the meeting ended, Nadine stood. "Thank you for seeing me," she said. Amani nodded. "Go in peace." Nadine glanced at Kwame, hoping for something: approval, forgiveness, alliance. He offered none. She left quietly. That night, Kwame sat alone, thinking about the fragile line between remorse and redemption, about how easily love became possession, about how courage often arrived disguised as loss. Amani slept peacefully. Outside, the city moved on, and for the first time since his life had split open at a red light, Kwame felt the final tie to his old self loosen. Not with drama, but with truth. Recovery did not arrive all at once. It came in small, almost invisible victories. The first time Amani walked the length of the hospital corridor without stopping, Kwame clapped softly like a proud child. She laughed, breathless but triumphant, brushing him off when he tried to steady her too much. You will make me weak with all this worrying, she teased. Kwame smiled, but his eyes stayed alert. He had learned that strength could be fragile, especially after years of neglect. 2 weeks later, the doctors cleared her for discharge, not back to the streets, not to a temporary shelter, home. Kwame stood in the doorway of his penthouse as the elevator doors opened. The city stretched endlessly behind glass walls, sunlight spilling across polished floors. For a moment, Imani hesitated, gripping her walking stick. "This place is too big," she said quietly. Kwame knelt beside her. "We'll make it smaller," he replied. "Together." The first few days were awkward. Imani moved slowly, unsure of where she belonged in this new space. She flinched at automated lights. She whispered apologies when she spilled water. She folded her clothes neatly and placed them in a corner, as if afraid to take too much room. Kwame noticed everything. One evening, he found her standing in the kitchen, staring at the expensive appliances with confusion. "Mama?" he said gently. "You don't have to ask permission to exist here." She turned to him, eyes soft but wounded. "I don't want to be a burden." The word pierced him. "You carried me for years," Kwame replied. "This is not a burden. This is balance." Slowly, the space changed. Imani placed a small mat by the window and prayed there every morning. She cooked simple meals, the smell of familiar spices grounding the apartment in memory. She opened the windows wide, letting the city air in. And Kwame changed too. He canceled dinners that didn't matter. He came home earlier. He learned how his mother took her tea. He listened, not as a CEO, as a son. Outside those walls, the world watched closely. Some critics softened, others waited for him to slip. But the Elder Care Initiative quietly expanded, partnering with clinics, funding outreach teams, reconnecting families who had stopped speaking years ago. Kwame did not attend every opening. He did not brand his face across banners. He insisted on one rule: no cameras where dignity is fragile. One afternoon, he returned to the old neighborhood with Imani, not announced, not protected by spectacle. They walked slowly side by side. People recognized her first. "Mama Imani," someone called. She smiled, waved, exchanged greetings like no time had passed. Then they noticed him. Whispers followed, some curious, some cautious, some grateful. A woman approached hesitantly. "You are the son who came back," she said. Kwame nodded. "I should have come sooner." She studied him for a moment, then smiled. "But you came." That night, as they sat together on the balcony, the city lights glowing below, Imani spoke softly. "You carry guilt like a heavy bag," she said. "You don't need to punish yourself forever." Kwame leaned back, staring at the sky. "I don't want to forget." "You don't have to," she replied. "Just don't let it harden you." He nodded. Weeks passed. The board stabilized. Investors returned cautiously. The storm lost interest in tearing him apart. One morning, Kwame received a letter, handwritten, from a young man who had reunited with his mother after 10 years because of the outreach program. "Thank you for reminding me that pride is expensive," it read. Kwame folded the letter carefully and placed it beside his bed. Later that day, he took Imani's hand and said, "I want to name the foundation after you." She frowned. "I don't want fame." "It's not fame," he said. "It's gratitude." She thought for a long moment, then nodded. "Only if it helps people remember their parents before it's too late." Kwame smiled. "That's the only reason." On the day the foundation was officially launched, there was no grand ceremony, just a simple gathering. Imani stood beside him, steady now, her presence quiet but powerful. Kwame spoke briefly. "My mother taught me that success without compassion is poverty. This work is not redemption, it is responsibility." That night back home, Imani sat knitting again, her hands steady. "You look peaceful," Kwame said. "I am," she replied. "I was lost, and now I am found." Kwame swallowed, emotion tightening his chest. He realized something then. This story was never about a billionaire seeing his mother begging. It was about a son learning to see his mother again before it was too late. The city no longer looked the same to Kwame before. It wasn't that the buildings had changed, or that the traffic had slowed, or that poverty had disappeared. It was that his eyes had learned a new way of seeing. Every street corner now carried a story. Every old face reminded him of time, of how quickly it passed and how cruelly it tested what truly mattered. On a warm Saturday morning, Kwame drove himself for the first time in years. No driver, no escort, no tinted windows. Imani sat in the passenger seat, her hands folded neatly in her lap. her scarf tied carefully around her head. "You don't trust anyone else to drive?" she asked with a teasing smile. Kwame chuckled. "I'm reclaiming old skills." They stopped at a familiar intersection, the red light, the same one. Cars slowed, pedestrians crossed. Life moved in ordinary rhythms, unaware of how much that place had changed him. Kwame parked the car and turned off the engine. Amani looked around, recognition dawning in her eyes. "This is where—" "Yes," Kwame said quietly, "this is where I found you." She stared out the window, her expression unreadable. "And where I was found," she corrected gently. Kwame nodded. They stepped out together. People noticed them almost immediately. Some recognized Kwame. Others recognized Amani. Murmurs spread, but no one interrupted. Kwame walked to the edge of the sidewalk and stood there, hands at his sides, breathing in the sounds of the street. He felt no shame now, no fear, only resolve. "This is where I lost my way," he said softly. "And where I found it again." Amani placed a hand on his arm. "The road teaches all of us," she said. "Not everyone listens." Kwame turned to her. "I want to do more." She raised an eyebrow. "More than you already are?" "Yes," he replied. "I want to make sure no mother has to wait for a red light to be seen." That afternoon, Kwame met with Grace Nwoye and several community leaders at a modest hall near the market. No press, no banners, just chairs arranged in a circle. They talked openly about aging parents left behind when children moved to cities, about pride that kept families apart, about hunger that hid behind dignity. Kwame listened more than he spoke. When it was his turn, he stood. "I won't promise miracles," he said, "but I promise presence. This foundation will not replace families. It will help bring them back together." Heads nodded slowly. Trust was not instant, but it was possible. In the weeks that followed, the Amani Bafour Foundation expanded quietly. Mobile health units visited forgotten neighborhoods. Counselors helped reunite estranged families. Shelters became homes, not holding rooms. Kwame visited often but never announced himself. He sat with old men and listened. He held hands with women who reminded him of his mother. He learned names. At home, life settled into something gentle. Imani grew stronger. Her laughter returned fully. She scolded Kwame when he skipped meals. She insisted on cooking on Sundays, filling the apartment with warmth and memory. One evening, as rain traced lines down the windows, Kwame sat across from her, watching her fold laundry. "Mama," he said quietly, "do you ever think about those years on the street?" Imani paused. Then she nodded. "Sometimes." "Are you angry?" he asked. She considered the question carefully. "I was," she admitted. "Not at you, at life, at how easy it is to become invisible." Kwame's chest tightened. But she continued, "Anger is heavy. I put it down." She looked at him directly. "You picked me up. That is enough." Kwame lowered his head, emotion pressing hard behind his eyes. A few days later, Kwame stood before a small group of young entrepreneurs at a leadership forum. He had been invited months ago before everything changed. This time he spoke without notes. "Success can build walls," he said, "and those walls can block out the people who made us possible. If you remember anything from my story, remember this: no achievement is worth the cost of forgetting your humanity." The room was silent. Afterward, a young man approached him. "I haven't called my mother in 5 years," he admitted. "I'm afraid." Kwame placed a hand on his shoulder. "So was I," he said. "Call anyway." That night, Kwame returned home late. Imani was asleep in her chair, a blanket draped over her shoulders. The television murmured softly. He smiled, gently turning it off, and covered her properly. As he did, she stirred slightly. "My son," she murmured, half asleep. "Yes, Mama. I'm proud of you." The words settled into him like a blessing. Kwame stood there for a long moment, understanding at last what wealth truly was. Not money, not power, not forgiveness from strangers, but the chance to sit beside the woman who gave him life and know he had not wasted it. Outside, the city lights shimmered. Cars stopped at red lights. Lives crossed paths. And somewhere another son would look up, another mother would wait. But this time hope had a place to land. When life moves fast, it teaches us how to build, how to win, how to survive. But too often, it forgets to teach us how to remember. This story is not really about wealth or poverty. It is about distance, the quiet distance that grows between people who once shared everything and how easily love can be postponed in the name of success. Kwame's journey reminds us of a painful truth. You can outrun your past, but you can never outrun the consequences of forgetting who stood by you when you had nothing. His mother did not ask for comfort, fame, or reward. She only wanted to be seen, to be remembered. And that is a lesson many of us learn too late sometimes, when there is no red light left to stop us. Life does not test us when things are easy. It tests us when doing the right thing costs us something: status, comfort, pride, or relationships that were built on convenience instead of truth. Real character is revealed not by what we gain, but by what we are willing to lose in order to remain human. If this story touched your heart, take a moment to reflect. Who in your life might be waiting for a call, a visit, or a simple acknowledgement before time runs out? Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. We read every one of them, and your story might help someone else find courage. And if you believe in stories that remind us of kindness, responsibility, and second chances, please subscribe to the channel. Your support helps us keep sharing stories that matter, because sometimes one story is enough to change the way we see the people we love.